Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And in this one, we're going to be reviewing the Elemental Shaman. I just completed my 2400 rating solo shuffle challenge, and I wanted to give you the pros and the cons. What type of player do I think Elemental Shaman is suited for? What are the advantages and what are the disadvantages? And what should your expectations be for this specialization overall? Now, the first thing about Elemental Shaman that you're going to enjoy, especially if you're trying a caster for the first time, is that it is, very easy to do damage. Most of your damage rotation is instant. As you can see, I'm putting Flame Shocks up, and these orange bars proc on the side of my character, which means that I can shoot Lava Burst instantly as well whenever that is available. And even if I have to hard cast Lava Burst, if I get interrupted on it, I have many other spells that I can cast. So it's very non-punishing for a beginner player in that sense, relative to a lot of other DPS that do need to cast, and when they get interrupted, it can completely set you back and totally debilitate your ability to get any sort of pressure going. Now, some of the disadvantages that come along with your damage being so easy and effective like this is that some of it is, constituted to RNG. You do have this initial window at the start of the fight where you have Ascendance, but it is a 3-minute cooldown, so it's very infrequent as far as when you get to access it when it is in your control. And the only other way to get to this Ascendance is proccing it through Earthshock, which if you do get lucky, can just chain react a huge amount of damage in one moment, where you can just kind of like casino your win. So if you want kind of easier beginner type of play for a caster DPS, where a lot of your wins are going to be determined more so by RNG as opposed to kind of like in your control and necessarily in skill, it is really good for that role. I would recommend it definitely for a beginner. Where things become more advanced is disruption of your opponents. So something like Wind Shear is a really low cooldown interrupt, which means, for example, in this situation, I could interrupt the Boomkin, the Warlock, or the Preservation Evoker every 12 seconds. So figuring out what you want to dedicate that interrupt to and what time frame should you use it can be really difficult. I would highly recommend that you focus it depending on what type of healer you're playing with. Some healers struggle with crowd control, and other healers struggle with overall damage. So something like a Paladin struggles with crowd control, so interrupting crowd control effects like Cyclone and Fear in this instance would be really effective. But something like a Priest might struggle more with damage, so interrupting Haunts from the Warlock or Malefic Raptures from the Warlock can aid a Disciplined Priest in their ability to heal, because you can see right now this Disciplined Priest is really struggling to keep us alive. We've used our Stone Bulwark Totem, which is a nice addition to the War Within. We're getting a lot more defensive cooldowns. We're a lot sturdier than we were in previous expansions, which again is a really good beginner-friendly thing to note about the specialization. And you can see we're able to get quite a bit of effective damage, utilize a Hex here, and get a Lava Burst through to finish off the Balance Druid. And in this lobby, if you're wondering like who is the best target to go after, I would probably put it as Balance Druid is the best target for pretty much every round. Frost Mage is second best target, Affliction's third, and then myself as the Shaman's probably the least as far as like priority in terms of survivability for this situation. But I find it kind of relaxing, honestly. So if you get really frustrated by crowd control effects and annoyed when you get spam interrupted, then Elemental Shaman is definitely the specialization for you, because even if you get interrupted, there's just 20 other things you could do. You hardcast Lava, you can Purge, you can Earthshock, you can throw a Root Totem down on somebody, you could stun somebody with Lightning Lasso, you can Wind Shear them back or Grounding Totem them. So it's really nice as far as that. I find it a lot more relaxing. And when you fight melee DPS, you can run things like the Static Field Totem and Unleash Shield to be able to knock enemies off of yourself and get a lot of distance and make it really easy to survive in that regard. So we're starting another match by just getting Flame Shock on as many targets as possible, and we can use our Magma Totem as well to get AoE Flame Shocks when there's a lot of targets together. And then we're going to pop Ascendance, blast out. We're using Wind Shear here on Cyclone to stop ourselves from getting crowd controlled on our Ascendance, and we're line of sighting at a pillar. And if you play like this during your cooldown window with Grounding Totem and Wind Shear and at a pillar, you can be really annoying for your opponents to kind of lock down and prevent the type of damage that you really want to be getting out. So it's much more like a kind of like bunker down, Miyagi-Do blocking, wax on, wax off type of play style, where you're just blocking everything coming in while lobbing out a couple of instant cast damage abilities and hoping that you kind of hit the casino with your RNG as far as proccing Ascendance and really being able to blast enemies through. Something that I feel like I don't do enough is utilizing Stormkeeper. I think, the ideal rotation is to get Stormkeeper up before you go for the Ascendance rotation, but I kind of just get overeager and just want to keep spamming Lava Bursts. Nice advantage of playing Shaman as well is you bring a lot of utility to your healer. So if you do want to play more more of a support role, and you have good awareness towards your healer, you have things like Tremor Totem. So for example, my priest was just in a sleepwalk, and I can use Tremor Totem to break them free from that. But if you don't want that type of utility, you kind of just want Zug Zug and do damage, you can play Ellie like that, but it's probably going to be a bit more of a struggle. Here we're disrupting Polymorph. I don't want my priest to go into a Polymorph, as I just had to use a lot of defensive cooldowns, but we get Cyclone. So Polymorph and Cyclone are probably both the main priority spells here, because we can use Tremor Totem on Sleepwalk. Here comes a Snowdrift. We can use Ghost Wolf to actually shapeshift and prevent this AoE circle from the mage from stunning us, because I have a talent where when you go in Ghost Wolf, every like 25 seconds or something, it removes snares. So it removes the stacking ramp from the mage. We can knock them away and avoid the stun. We've procced an Ascendance. Look at the pressure that we get from that, forcing Barkskin, forcing the Boomkin to run behind the pillar. But the mage does have Icy Veins up right now and could be kind of scary. So, making a push in this position could be risky. But I got Primordial Wave, and Primordial Wave gives you a ton of Lava Burst, super satisfying animation. I'm kind of sad that it's going away next patch. They're kind of reworking it to just be like this big blast of damage towards targets that have Flame Shock. But I also like that you have like a lot of customizable PvP talents as Elemental Shaman. I feel like a lot of specs don't have a lot of interchangeability, and I've seen a lot of different play styles. Like for example, in this one I'm playing Heroism or Bloodlust, and I love popping that on a caster when there's double caster, and just getting a huge haste buff at a moment in time for my team every minute, and then blasting up tons of lava bursts with it like this, where able to just kind of just rampage over people, and drop the balance druid and take round 2. Or you can play more defensive oriented. You might want to go for a counter strike or static field totem. A lot of the PvP talents feel a lot more flexible and not just like auto locked in. It feels like more of a playstyle thing, decision, or maybe a situational thing at times. One might be more favorable in a certain situation, but you get to change them around. I'm curious to see how Stormbringer plays out, because right now at least Farseer seems to be the mainstay hero talent tree. So you basically got like that one Lava Burst build. I've seen a couple of Stormbringer Shamans at decent ratings, but again, you have to cast way more, and it is more punishing to play that. But maybe in a lobby like this, so there's double casters, they're prioritizing kicks on Cyclone. Maybe Stormbringer could actually have a place here. It's something that I'm likely going to try into the future, and I think Stormbringer is actually getting some buffs. So note that for the future, if you want to invest as this being your main, like should you main an Elemental Shaman. Here I'm just starting things off really hectic, just popping Ascendance basically off the rip here to get Lava Burst just flowing into every target as possible. Solar Beam onto the healer. Warlock has to port to try and save his life, and if you get lucky in the opener, like you can peak sometimes 2 million DPS using Stormkeeper this round as well. And it's just nice because it can bait kicks as well, and it's nice that you are kind of like a kick baiter. A lot of other casters, you don't use Hex and you don't use Stormkeeper, then your healer has to deal with all the kicks. But if you get kicked out, you don't care. You're just Flame Shocking a Lava Burst, and you just have a good time at that point. So we get knocked out of the barrier. We can use Gust of Wind, which is really fun mobility, which is just that jump that enables us to get back into the shield here that the priest has put down for us. And I'm just tossing heals out, but I don't care if I get kicked, because look, I can just immediately press Lava Burst and be A-okay. Knock the mage on his stun, but we're getting really low health right now, so it's time to get Earth Shields up, and this is where the team utility of Elemental Shaman can come in really clutch. So we're going to refresh Earth Shield to kind of stagger the damage and help out our healer with their recovery at that moment in time. And it's nice that its utility makes you feel rewarded for paying attention to moments like that, to aid your team and be like, okay, I've contributed to our ability to recover. Now we're stable. We can start making our push, and we just absolutely crank. We just absolutely knock that mage's lights out in this round. And you are kind of like a king of the wizards when it comes to Elemental Shaman, and that's something I've noticed, at least with lobbies, as you get higher and higher rating, you tend to see more and more casters. At the earlier levels of play, it's more about knowing how to play around your knockbacks. You absolutely have to play around Static Field Totem. You have to play around Unleash Shield, Ghost Wolf Kiting, Thunderstorm, and Earth Grab. You got to focus on just like, again, Miyagi-Do, karate, just knocking enemies away and not letting anybody get to you, basically. And if you can master that, you'll get out of the low elo melee Zug Fests, and you'll get into the caster heavens, where Elemental Shaman really gets its time to shine. We got Root Totem on one side here with a Cap Totem. It's a really good combo. You can Earth grab targets to hold them in place, and then drop a Capacitator Totem next to them to stun them, which is just a super satisfying stun to land. Although I do wish it lasted a little bit longer in duration. And we kind of force the Boomkin and the Warlock back to the pillar here with tons of crowd control onto the healer with a sheep and a sleep. That's forced the Trinket Pain Suppression. We're deep breathing the whole team. We're just AoEing them. We're just having a blast at this point, at the beginning stage of this game, doing monstrous amounts of damage to everybody that comes in our line of sight. And this is when Elemental Shaman is really like The most satisfying is when you do get that triple target in front of you with Ascendance and Lava Burst is just flowing. You just feel like a volcano of power just ranging out onto anything that comes near you. We're knocking the Boomkin out into the open so that he can't escape our assault here by line of sighting at the pillar. But we got to refresh Earth Shield as well. Our healer is in crowd control. This is where using grounding totem when your healer is in CC or to stop the next CC is a really good idea. Try and go for a wind shear. Looks like he's faked it. Goes for a Cyclone again. I could have grounded it. This is where kind of like the top level play of Shaman comes to show itself is how good are you at stopping crowd control? It's more like a goalie, right? Elemental Shaman is like a defenseman in hockey or a goalie in hockey. Just like how many pucks can you stop from getting into the net? And every puck shot is basically a crowd control. And that's your main goal as far as defense. But while the offense is a little bit more lackadaisical and a lot more instant cast, and you can kind of chill with it. Here we're using the Stone Bulwark Totem. We're refreshing Earth Shield as our healer is in crowd control, trying to aid with the recovery during those times. And it's managed to hold us a little bit longer, but now the Affliction Boomkin are really sinking their teeth in. So we're going to use Lasso. We get kicked, but again, we don't really care. We can just use Magma Totem, get Flame Shocks and everything again, and immediately chuck out Lava Burst. So it's really good to cast whenever you're an Elemental Shaman, because if you get kicked, then your team is happy. You're just a kick sponge basically at that point. And you get to absorb all the pressure for free with no loss to yourself. We're refreshing Earth Shield on the mage here, trying to toss out some off heals with Healing Surge as well. He's just taking tremendous amounts of damage. I could use maybe an Earth Grab Totem here to root the enemy casters as they're pushing in, but we get caught in a triple Solar Beam. And with Incarnation up, triple Solar Beam, that's probably lights out for us. Stacking up against these classes definitely is not going to be the move in this instance. But we also were just running really low on cooldowns at that point. But my damage could be a lot higher. So you can see my DPS, sometimes it just fluctuates a lot if you're not getting lucky, or if the enemy healer spam dispelling, which is, again, that's, I would say, a con. If healers know how to play around you, they're going to mash dispel on your flame shock, and it comes down to your ability to see who got dispelled and how quickly can you reset that flame shock on that target using Magma Totem, Primordial Wave, and Magma Totem. I said that twice. Magma Totem, Primordial Wave, and Flame Shock. You can see you've got 3 ways to apply it. You want to always be making sure also that you've got an elemental down. I start the game of Fire Elemental to get it on cooldown to get another one. But once it's faded, you can use Stormkeeper to summon in an elemental. It'll summon in a little lightning one, or you can use Earth Elemental. And the reason the elemental is important is because it reduces damage that you take. So you do kind of want to try and maintain almost 100% uptime of elementals. Here we got a big Ascendance proc with that Primordial Wave, and we're just chucking through 1.5 million DPS, and they're just running for the hills behind the pillar, and you're just a disco ball of lava just flowing constantly into this Warlock, forcing paint suppression. This is when it's super fun, is when you got full Maelstrom power, and you're just basically spamming Earthshock and just creating for really big numbers onto the Warlock or on whatever target's in front of you, and when you're proccing Ascendance and able to chain it together. We can use a knockback here to avoid the stun from the mage with that Snowdrift and reposition around the corner. One thing I would maybe like to do a little bit more here, as I'm noticing, is my Lightning Lasso usage in this lobby. And this is another reason why I do these VOD reviews also for you guys, is that you get vital information after watching yourself play back as far as like, what could I have been doing a little bit better? What abilities am I like not using frequently enough in the game? And right now I'm just noticing Lightning Lasso has just been on cooldown basically the whole time. And Counterspell and Spell Lock have been used. Now they're both available, but you can also put a Grounding Totem and then go for a Lasso to distract them from having to kill that before being able to interrupt you. Knocking enemies out of defensive cooldowns, always a really satisfying experience there. Knocking them out of the barrier, getting distance. And okay, now we got the Lasso with a Solar Beam onto the healer there, which forced a trinket. If we had lassoed a little early, maybe we wouldn't have a trinket for this point in time, but we get a cycle on the priest that forces a trinket. And look at this pressure that we're getting right now on the Warlock and the mage. We're just doing so much damage, just jumping on top of their faces, trying to make sure that we're maximizing our damage here. I know Evoker's got a lot of healing output when they're not crowd controlled, so I can be a bit more aggressive in this type of situation, this type of matchup. But now I see the mage coming in, and I'm dropping an Earth Elemental, and that's to give myself the damage reduction during the stun lock. And maybe I would have died here without that additional damage reduction from this Earth Elemental. And that's why I say it's important to think of the elementals as like defensive cooldowns. You kind of want to focus on their uptime overall, but maybe also focus on key moments where you're going to be taking a lot of damage in order to keep yourself alive. Like, look how low health I'm getting right now. I die even through it. Look how low the mage was. It's so close. I've got a lasso here too. Maybe I could have got something snuck through in order to stay alive a little bit longer in that round. But this is the fun part about going back into the VOD and looking at it. And sometimes it can be painful, right? Like, you're going to go back in the VOD and you're going to look at it and be like, oh my God, like, what am I doing? Everything is wrong. But if you don't look at it, then you're never going to be able to fix it. You keep it in the fog, you'll never know how to improve it and get better at it moving into the future. So it's just something that you kind of have to get used to, and it's something that I think that I'm used to from being a musician and practicing my saxophone and listening to myself back and be like, wow, I really don't like the way that I sound, but okay, this is what it sounds like. What can I do now to change that moving into the future to sound better into the future? Same thing applies to literally anything. Whether you're getting good at video game or you're getting good at something else. So I would recommend doing this 1,000% if you're really struggling to climb or to improve over time. But we're just starting the game. Fire Elemental out is down. Flame Shocks are up. We got Primordial Waver ready to Ascendance. We're trying to purge off that altar time. We don't get lucky, so we're just going to blast the Boomy. He dispels Flame Shock, and you can see it's making it difficult. Got to refresh that as soon as possible and just chuck in Lava Burst. I'm using Lasso better in this round, so maybe I even noticed that from round to round myself, even without watching it back. Try and send that on cooldown. Bait trinkets with it. Get interrupts out of the way as well for our teammates, and try and reposition here so we get in line of sight. I got a Stormkeeper behind the pillar while they were lining, so that way I could get a little bit of guaranteed damage if I wasn't getting any Lava Burst procs. We also get Ice Fury procs, which are super fun, which is boost up, amplify our Frost Shock, make us do a bit of damage. Root Totem, Cap Totem on the Priest behind the pillar. Love doing that. Just get a little bit of extra CC on the healer, but our healer's also in a sheep, so got to be a bit concerned with this. I got no wind shear, no ground. Priest is moving in for fears. I don't really want to Tremor the Warlock. I think I'd rather save it for the healer, so I'm not going to Tremor Totem here. But now he's put into a Root Totem, so we're playing defensive. Just pay attention to CC on your healer. I got an add-on here called Big Debuffs that basically makes CC on my allies' frames really big, like in this corner that you can see. It makes it much easier for me to tell when they're CC'd and when I need to be running away. And I would highly recommend getting that Big Debuffs. We go for another Lightning Lasso, but the mage is getting close to us, so we use Ghost Swift to Shapeshift to cancel it. We knock him away so he doesn't get the stun. We're chucking in some big Earth Shocks. We force Invis. We got good AoE pressure on all three targets. We're maintaining Flame Shocks. We're going to root them in the middle here so they can't just immediately retreat back to the pillar without having to face backlash of dispelling a UA or a Flame Shock, which is a really fun combo. Probably one of my most favorite specs to play with is an Affliction Lock, because they can help protect your Flame Shocks a little bit more. Or the enemy healer takes a big backlash. I see the mage coming in on top, so I'm going to hex him on his stun here, limit his ability to get Ice Lances off during that stun moment, and buy some time for my team. And here we get an Ascendance proc, and this is the mode, which is Force Block. And you can see if you hit the casino just right, like, you know, the house, as they say, the house always wins, but I don't know. Sometimes you can beat the house. Solar Beam comes down on our healer, so maybe we need to focus on, you know, grounding totem here. Maybe a little bit of defense. Nah, it doesn't look like it. The Solar Beam just breaks, and we are just lobbing damage. Anything in my line of sight doesn't matter. I do not discriminate. Just hit whatever is in range, whatever is in line of sight, whatever you can do maximum damage to. If it's the healer, it's the healer. Knock the mage away from his stun, out into the open. Stun him out in the open here for our warlock to be able to cast on. Toss out a magma totem onto the priest and the boomy. Keep flame shocks flowing onto multiple targets, and just keep ramping. Just keep ramping. Keep doing tons of damage. Keep them pinned at the pillar as much as possible, cowering for their lives. Try and purge off altar times when you can. I see a warlock interrupt here on the boomy, so I'm looking at the priest possibly for a kick on a penance, and look at that swap to the healer. Just anything in my line of sight, I am blasting. Our healer trinkets to get a bit aggressive. Could have grounded this clone, but our warlock's moving in on the left. I'm moving in on the right. We've got him pincered, and this is the best maneuver you can make as a wizard, Cleave, where you're struggling to kind of like get on top of your opponents, is to notice where your partner is going on a pillar. If they're going one side, go the opposite side, so that way one of you is guaranteed to cast on the enemy team. Here we see that stun coming through. Mage gets knocked away from it, and we're able to survive that Comet Storm hit. Now that with that Comet Storm on cooldown, it's time to get aggressive, pushing in on top of the healer. Got a lasso here, gonna go for that on the priest. Counterspell, well, I don't really care. Now my warlock doesn't have to deal with it. He's gonna cast Haunt, Malefic Rapture, and basically AoE your whole team. So I'm still pretty happy about it. Jump on top of the priest. Big lava burst procs. We've got Ascendance. This is why I send it really early, so I can likely see 2 of it. We're able to close out the game, get a nice 30 points. I think this was the lobby before I hit 2,400, but it's a really satisfying spec. I think it's a little bit more beginner friendly as far as doing damage, but defense is definitely a little bit more advanced, requires a little bit more awareness, but you can have decent success, even which is the beginning stages of awareness towards the specialization. And I think it is really fun right now. But again, take it if you don't want RNG to, you know, be dictating your outcomes that much, then you may not like it as much. But that is my review for Elemental Shaman on whether you should or should not main it. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you do, please leave a thumbs up and a comment down below with what specialization you would like me to do next, as I'm doing the 2,400 challenge, and I'm trying to hit as many specs as possible in order to give you the experience from 0 to 2,400, what to expect and what kind of, you know, flavor are you going to get out of the experience. But thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.